happened. And here's the thing, even when you stayed silent, even when you didn't defend yourself or call them out, God was taking notes. That's the kind of father he is. He's close to the brokenhearted. And when you cry in the dark, when you feel like you're the only one who truly knows how bad it was, God is closer than your next breath. He's not just aware. He's deeply moved by your pain. You are not overlooked. Some people hurt others and just move on like it never happened. They post about how great their life is, pretending they didn't leave behind a trail of emotional wreckage. But God doesn't operate on social media timelines. He doesn't get distracted by the performance. He sees the heart. He sees what was done in secret. And he is not mocked. What people sow, they will reap. You may not see it yet, but it's already in motion. God is already handling it. The justice of God doesn't always come with flashing lights and public apology. Sometimes it comes quietly. Sometimes the people who hurt you wake up one day to find their lives empty, their relationships broken, their souls tormented. And they don't even realize it's the harvest of what they planted. And while you're over here still thinking they got off easy, God's justice is unfolding in ways that only he can orchestrate. But God's justice isn't just about punishment. It's also about validation. He wants you to know in your spirit that you are not crazy, you are not too sensitive, and you are not to blame for the toxic behavior of others. He confirms you. He reminds you that your heart was right, even when theirs wasn't. That your desire to love, to fix, to hold on, to forgive, that wasn't weakness. That was strength, and he honors that. There is a comfort that comes when you start to understand that you don't need to be your own avenger. You don't need to keep rehearsing the hurt in your mind because the righteous judge has already opened the case. He sees the root of it all. He sees not just what they did, but why they did it. And he's not only dealing with them, he's preparing something greater for you, something that doesn't just restore what was lost, but blesses you beyond what was broken, even when you've been overlooked by people, discarded like you didn't matter. God has never missed one moment of your story. He's watched every step, every sacrifice, every time you chose love over hate, peace over revenge, and every single one of those moments is sacred to him. One of the hardest things to accept when you've been hurt is that God doesn't always deal with people the way we want him to. Let's be honest. We all have our own ideas of what justice should look like. We want instant accountability. We want someone to see what they did, admit it, apologize, and change. We want closure that makes sense. But that's not always how God works, because God is looking at your story, he's looking at the whole picture. He's not just trying to correct behavior, he's dealing with hearts, and hearts are complicated. Sometimes we expect lightning bolts and exposure. God, let everyone see what they did, let the truth come out, and let them feel what I felt. But instead it looks like they're thriving, still smiling, still getting opportunities. And you're like, Lord, what is going on here? But God says in Isaiah 55, 8-9, my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways. He's not just punishing, he's positioning. He's not just reacting, he's redeeming. And that takes time. We live in a world that celebrates instant results, but God is not in a rush to meet your timeline. His justice is layered, it's surgical, it reaches places that you don't see. You might want someone to feel sorry for what they did, but God might be working on why they did it, and while he's doing that, he's also working on you, because God doesn't just want justice for you, he wants healing in you. That's the part we often miss. That God gave us justice our way, we might end up bitter and hard-hearted, because vengeance tastes sweet for a moment, but it leaves poison in your soul. God knows how to deal with people without turning you into a reflection of what hurt you. That's why he says in Romans 12:19, vengeance is mine, I will repay. Not you repay, not Facebook repay, not petty comments and silence and attitude repay. God repay. And let's be real, sometimes what we want isn't justice. It's revenge dressed up in a church outfit. We say, I want peace, but deep down we're praying they trip on the very thing they tried to throw at you. But God doesn't answer prayers that come from a toxic root. He handles justice with purity, with holiness, with eternity in mind. And that means some things you'll never fully understand on this side of heaven. You may never get the apology. You may never see the tears. You may never hear the words you waited for. But that doesn't mean justice hasn't been served. Some of the most powerful things God does, he does in secret. You don't know what he's convicting someone of. You don't know the dreams they're having. You don't know how empty they feel when they lay down at night. Just because you can't see the courtroom doesn't mean the trial isn't happening. And sometimes God's justice looks like removing you from the mess. He doesn't always change the other person. Sometimes he just rescues you. He shuts the door, cuts the tie, clears the path and says, you're not going back there. And you sit there asking, but God, what about them? He answers, I'll deal with them you. Just follow me. That's justice too. Sometimes it's not thunder and fire. Sometimes it's a quiet exit and a brand new beginning. God knows the cost of what you went through. He knows how it drains you, changed you, and tried to define you. That's why his justice is so personal. It's not just settling a score. He's restoring your soul. He's not just punishing someone. He's preparing you for something better. And he will not allow what was meant to destroy you to go unanswered. There comes a point in your life where you have to stop performing for people who've already made up their minds about you. You can explain, justify, and clarify until your voice goes hoarse, and they'll still twist it. Why? Because some people aren't looking for truth. They're looking to protect their version of the story. They're committed to misunderstanding you. But hear me, you don't have to prove yourself to anyone. If God knows your heart, that's enough. Too many of us are walking around drained, not from the pain, but from the pressure of trying to convince someone we're not who they said we were. You're trying to fix their image of you. You're trying to undo the damage of gossip, of gaslighting, of manipulation. And you're carrying a burden that was never yours to begin with. You keep showing up for people who would never show up for you. You keep defending yourself in battles that God already called you out of. Let them talk. Let them assume. Let them whisper behind closed doors. God doesn't require a character reference to bless you. He doesn't wait on public opinion to open doors for you. People may try to shut you out, but God has the master key. And if you keep chasing their approval, you might miss the anointing that's already resting on your life. The need to be validated by people who devalued you will always leave you empty. There is something freeing about realizing that silence is not weakness. Jesus himself didn't answer every accusation. When he was mocked, when he was lied about, when he was dragged before courts that had no authority over him, he didn't argue because he knew who he was. And when you know who you are in Christ, you don't feel the urge to prove anything. You realize that peace is louder than performance. You may have people in your life who think they know you based on a version of you they helped damage. And now they treat your healing like rebellion. They call your growth attitude. They call your boundaries disrespect. And you find yourself constantly explaining why you don't want to go back to dysfunction. But hear me, You're not obligated to keep people comfortable in a narrative that keeps you in bondage. Sometimes proving yourself becomes a trap. You keep trying to be good enough for someone who keeps moving the goalposts. You give more, love harder, work harder, stay longer, and still it's never enough. That's not love. That's control. That's manipulation. And the enemy would love for you to stay stuck trying to earn what God already freely gave. Your worth, value, and dignity. God never asked you to beg for respect. He never asked you to keep performing for some affection. He never asked you to stay in a place where your identity has to be constantly defended. That's not humility. Real humility is knowing who you are in Christ and refusing to let anyone drag you back into insecurity, fear, or shame. Real humility trusts that God's opinion is the only one that ultimately matters. You don't need to prove that you were loyal. God. Healing isn't just about feeling better. It's about releasing what's been holding you hostage. And for a lot of people, the breakthrough doesn't come because they're still clinging to what broke them. You can't grab hold of God's peace with clenched fists full of pain, bitterness, and what-ifs. There has to be a letting go. Not because it didn't matter, not because it didn't hurt, but because you're finally deciding that it can't have power over your life anymore. Letting go doesn't mean it never affected you. Letting go doesn't mean you're pretending it didn't happen. It means you're choosing freedom over control. Some of us are holding on to the wound like it's our identity. They left me, they betrayed me, they used me, and you replay that story so many times it becomes the soundtrack of your soul. But healing begins when you decide, that's not who I am anymore. That's what happened to me, but it's not where I'm staying. You can't walk into a new season dragging the weight of old pain. It slows you down. It wears you out. And eventually you start adjusting your expectations to match your wounds instead of your worth. You start shrinking your life to avoid being hurt again, but letting go is how you make room for God to come in and do what only He can do. Restore, redeem, and renew. It's how the transformation starts. Not by getting even, but by releasing. We often hold on because we think it gives us power. If I stay mad, they'll know how much they hurt me. If I hold this grudge, it'll protect me from getting hurt again. But let's be real. Unforgiveness doesn't protect you, it poisons you. It keeps you connected to what God is trying to separate you from. Letting go is not weakness. It's the boldest thing you can do. It's an act of trust. It says, God, I don't need to control the outcome. I trust you to handle what I can't. Some of you are still waiting on someone to make it right before you let it go. You're holding out for an apology, a confession, a change of heart. But what if that never comes? Do you stay stuck forever? Healing can't wait for someone else to grow up. Healing starts when you say, I'm done carrying this. You don't need their permission to move on. You don't need their words to validate your pain. You need God's hand to lift the weight off your heart. Sometimes what we really need to let go of is the fantasy, what we thought it would be, who we hoped they would become, how we imagined it would turn out. And that grief is real. Letting go isn't just about releasing a person. It's about releasing the expectation, the illusion, the dream that died. But even then, God is still faithful. Even then, He still has a plan. Even then, you are still whole, still loved, still chosen. You may feel like if you let it go, it means they win, but the truth is the longer you hold on, the more you lose. You lose time, peace, sleep, joy. And the only person that pain is punishing is you. Letting go is not about erasing the past. It's about refusing to let the past erase you. It's reclaiming your power, not by clinging to pain, but by trusting God with the process. And He will honor it. Letting go is often messy. It doesn't happen in a moment. Sometimes it's a decision you have to make every single day. Sometimes it's tears on your pillow and prayers through gritted teeth. But little by little, layer by layer, as you let go, healing takes root. You'll wake up one day and realize the sting isn't there anymore. The weight has lifted. The memory is still real, but it no longer has control. You can't control what other people do, but you can control what lives in your heart. Life will give you plenty of reasons to get bitter, to lash out, to shut down. But God says, guard your heart, for out of it flow the issues of life. That means everything in your life, your peace, your joy, your ability to love again. It all starts with the condition of your heart. And when people hurt you, mistreat you, or overlook you, the temptation is to let your heart get hard. But that's exactly where the enemy wants you. The devil doesn't just attack your circumstances. He goes after your character. Because if he can mess with your heart, he can mess with your decisions. That's why keeping your heart right isn't just about being nice. It's about protecting your destiny. When your heart is full of resentment, it's hard to hear God clearly. When your heart is full of pride or offense, it's hard to walk in peace. So keeping your heart right is not weakness, it's spiritual warfare. It's easy to love God when things are going well. It's easy to be kind when people are treating you right. But the real test of your spiritual maturity is how you act when you're wronged. When they don't apologize, when they twist the truth, when they walk away and make you look like the villain. That's when God says, will you still trust me enough to keep your heart clean? Will you still do right even when they do wrong? You're not responsible for how they treat you, but you are responsible for how you respond. And when you keep your heart right, you don't just protect your peace, you give God permission to handle what you can. He will fight your battles. He will bring justice. But if you step into bitterness, revenge, or gossip, you start trying to fight battles He never asked you to fight. And then it's not about what they did, it's about the condition of your soul. A right heart is not a perfect heart. It's a surrendered one. It says, God, I'm hurting, but I still want to honor you. It says, Lord, I don't understand why they treated me that way, but I refuse to let it poison. It says, this anger feels justified, but I trust that you'll deal with them in your timing, not mine. That's a heart God can use. That's a heart He can heal. That's a heart He can elevate because it's not bound by offense or pride. Some of us are blocking our own blessings because we've let our hearts get cold. We're still praying, still serving, still smiling, but deep down there's bitterness that hasn't been dealt with. God doesn't just want your Sunday worship. He wants the places in your heart that are bruised and guarded. He wants the parts you've tried to protect by pushing people away, because what you hide, He can't heal, but what you surrender, He can redeem. Keeping your heart right doesn't mean you become a doormat. It doesn't mean you don't have boundaries. It means you walk in freedom. You forgive, not to let them off the hook, but to keep yourself from being chained to what they did. You speak the truth in love, not out of rage. You release the need to get even, and you pick up the peace that passes understanding, because nothing is more valuable than a heart that's free. The truth is, your heart is the soil where God plants His promises. If that soil gets corrupted by bitterness, pride, unforgiveness, or envy, then the seeds won't grow right. But when your heart is soft, open, and aligned with God, everything changes, doors open, clarity comes, peace flows, and no matter what anyone does around you, you stay rooted, you stay steady, and you keep rising. Forgiveness isn't about pretending it didn't hurt. It's not about sweeping it under the rug, acting like everything is fine, or putting on a fake smile. No, forgiveness is one of the hardest decisions you'll ever make because it costs you something. It costs you your right to stay angry. It costs you the satisfaction of holding it over someone's head. But what you gain in return is freedom. Freedom from torment, freedom from bitterness, freedom from carrying the weight of something that was never yours to hold forever. You may feel like if you forgive, you're letting them off easy, that somehow it means what they did was okay. But forgiveness doesn't say it didn't matter. Forgiveness says, I'm not going to let this control my life anymore. You're not giving them a gift. They may never even know. You're giving yourself a gift. You're saying, I'm choosing peace over poison. I'm choosing joy over judgment. I'm choosing to walk in the light even if they're still standing in the dark. Some of the most bound people are not the ones in prison cells. They're the ones sitting in church pews every week, smiling on the outside, but holding deep grudges on the inside. They're trapped in a cage built by offense and reinforced by pride. And the enemy loves it because as long as you're holding on to unforgiveness, you're not moving forward. You're spiritually stuck. You might still be praying and serving, but your heart is tied to a moment that God is trying to bring you out of. Forgiveness doesn't change the past, but it changes it softens your heart. It unclogs the spiritual flow between you and God. Jesus said in Matthew 6, if you don't forgive others, your Father won't forgive you. And that's not about punishment. That's about alignment. God is trying to show you that bitterness blocks blessing. And when you let go, He can step in. When you release it, He can restore. But He won't fight for your future while you're still clinging to the past. Some of us are waiting to feel like forgiving, but feelings don't leave. Faith does. You may never feel like it. You may never wake up one day and say, you know what? Today seems like a great day to forgive the person who betrayed me. But if you wait for the feelings, you'll stay in the pain. Forgiveness is a decision. And sometimes it's a decision you have to make over and over until your heart catches up. But with every decision, you get a little freer. You breathe a little easier. Forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. It doesn't mean you have to let them back into your life. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is forgive and release. You set them free in your spirit, but you don't invite them back into the same space where they hurt you. Boundaries are not bitterness. Distance is not hate. You can forgive and still protect your peace. Forgiveness is about you and God. It's about keeping your soul clean and your heart whole. The truth is, unforgiveness often hurts you more than it hurts them. While you're replaying the offense, they're living their life. While you're carrying the wound, they may not even realize or care what they did. But forgiveness is how you break